Today we are learning basketball with Ben Pfeifer. You can find him on Twitter at BJPF_. He's with Sportscasting NBA and Swish Theory, covering the NBA draft and the NBA and keeping an eye on those Pacers at all times. I know over there, Ben, as well. So super excited to talk to. We're going to talk today about Ben's draft process and his scouting process, where he uses film-based projectable impact rating to show two-way impact and to measure, who has the best games among these draft prospects. And I'll let him explain more. I'm super excited to dive into his process there. I'm going to draft the best 2026 NBA draft guards on today's podcast and shout out some of the big performances. A historic night in college basketball Saturday night with 6 different players popping off and 3 freshmen scoring over 40 points for the first time in Division I history since freshmen were allowed to play. Just insane numbers for Bonsa and Flemings, just to name a few. And we'll dive into all that. But, first, how you doing today, Ben?
I'm doing well, like you said. Tons of awesome draft stuff as of late. Still catching up on all of the performances from Saturday, since there were so many incredible ones. But yeah, no, I'm doing well. Always excited to talk ball.
Absolutely insane. Yeah, I wrote about it for Pacers on his side this time around because I'm just writing a little for Pacers here and there, but it's mostly just draft stuff there. But Keaton Wagler, Kingston Flemings, AJ DeBonsa over 40 points, and then Boozer and Acuff 32 and 31. Nate Ament pops off for 29. Nice to see him have a little breakout game. I know he's had a bit of a slow start to the draft process side of things, but just cool to see all these freshmen just pop off. There was a great stat making the rounds on Twitter about how historic this class is via box plus minus, where there's normally 2 players per class that have over a 10 BPM, and this draft class has 5 players with over a 12 BPM at the moment between Darryn Peterson, Cam Boozer, Caleb Wilson, Kingston Flemings, and AJ DeBonsa. So just insane, with Boozer leading the way, 2nd overall BPM of all time. Like, just an insane class that I'm excited to dive into. And it's so deep, we're going to just focus on the guards today and highlight some of our favorite guys. But before we do that, let's dive into your process a little bit. Tell me a little bit about your player grade draft process in general, and I'll bring up the article you wrote about it as well if you want to highlight anything in it.
Yeah, for sure. So as part of my scouting process, I watch all these games, right? And pretty much just chart every play a prospect makes, and I count those up, scale it per 40, and make a grade. But I'm not just like counting box score stuff necessarily. Like, there are a lot of plays, obviously. I think anyone who watches basketball understands at some level that there are tons of things that happen in any given basketball game that aren't quantified by a box score, and lots of things that happen that are quantified by a box score that aren't particularly meaningful, especially for predicting translation to the next level. So that's kind of where I got the idea for this project. And yeah, I've just kind of been building it up and also using it as a way to just legitimize my scouting process and eliminate all of like the biases that come with scouting, like your aesthetic bias, your recency bias. So trying to keep myself from hanging on to like the most recent piece of info or an old piece or a new piece of it, or like anchoring to the old piece of info, with just looking at like holistically how prospects have played over a sample. But
yeah, you can definitely appreciate that because, sometimes you might just watch the best performance of a guy's career or the best performance of his season last, and you get a little bit of bias from, he made 3 floaters that game. Maybe that's like his go-to shot, and then maybe those were the only 3 floaters he made all season, and you're totally off on kind of like his actual effectiveness, but you caught him on a good night. So you can kind of buy the touch and potential, but when it comes to the actual shot, he's not good at it. So it's good to maybe have those stats over time. But that's also a cool way, like you said, to legitimize kind of the consistency and the process of the draft scouting process for you, and just kind of keep up with an overall account of what happened without relying on, memory for everything. That can always be a little tricky to begin with. But, you have your grades here for, at least in this article, via net impact plays. So tell me, When I think of a stat like this, I think you're tracking every winning play a guy makes out there, and in general, that can be defined a lot of different ways. How do you define that for this measure?
For sure. And like I said before, it's all subjective, of course. And I wrote I have a bunch of film examples in the article of, kind of my process. But to me, I'm looking at plays that, like you said, obviously indicate winning impact, but translatable winning impacts. Like it's undeniable that, players who finish a lot of shots at the rim, players who, have a lot of assists, whatever, are valuable. But there's a lot of moments where, players make layups, make shots at the rim that either are, wide open, not replicable. So I'm pretty much looking at things that, to me, and, using my 7-8 years of scouting experience to kind of determine what things I think are translatable. So, there's a lot of things like advantages created, right, that aren't captured that I think is very valuable. There's plenty of like potential assists, right, where passes that lead to shots, or even like, not shots that could have been shots at another level or the next level. I think those are valuable plays that aren't quantified. I do value shot making, but I don't like double count points for shot making. It's like if a player makes a contested shot, I'm not double counting that since they didn't create an advantage or anything. But obviously there are players who hit contested shots that's valuable. And I really do kind of believe in the philosophy of, part of why I definitely value like the stats, but I'm definitely lean film. And just part of that is just because not all box score stats and things are created equal, right? Like we can differentiate between a defensive rebound where a ball tips out to a player and they just kind of grab it and that's their rebound, versus one where someone jumps in traffic, flies over two people, and then grabs the rebound. Or even like there's some steals, right, where a player just like an offensive player just like loses the ball and the defensive player that picks up the ball happens to be rewarded with a steal. In the box score, that adds to the steal rate, but if you actually watched the game, you'd understand that that play doesn't actually mean anything. And I think this is where the idea of like these statistical indicators as proxies has a limitation, because they are just proxies, right? Like for athleticism and feel or whatever. And I think a lot of people kind of treat them not as proxies and more as fact, which I think is just going to get people in trouble and lead to misses. And then obviously defense is is another like important use case, since, we only have steals, blocks, defensive rebounds, right? For like defensive box score plays. There's not really much.
Right.
Whereas like offensively, I think stats can do a fairly decent job of like projecting impact. Definitely, I think you want to watch the film. But like, generally the efficient, high usage, low turnover, those guys are generally, you can do a pretty decent job, I think, just kind of projecting offense. But defense, I don't think that's the case at all. I think there's plenty of examples of guys like with good stock numbers, like Boozer, for example, who I think, or even like Tyler Tanner, who I don't necessarily think are as impressive defensively as their stock numbers. Or of course, inverse with, a player like Hannes Steinbach, who I think is much better, or Avdilis, who I think is a much better defensive prospect. Because, stuff like, making on-time rotations, even like deflections aren't kept and logged publicly at the college level. Obviously, that's, info, defensive field goal percentage, a lot of stuff that goes into defensive impact at the impact stats at the NBA level just don't exist publicly or even privately, to my knowledge, in a lot of cases for the NBA, for college. So that's another use case, right? Where, I can go on NBA.com and look up the leaders in deflections. And see that, hey, there's some players like don't get a ton of steals but are crazy high in deflections, which obviously I think,
right.
People use that, understand that's valuable, base award picks and stuff off of stuff like that. And yet there's nothing like that in college, really. It's like, oh, this guy gets steals and blocks, he's probably a good defensive prospect. Oh, this guy doesn't get steals and blocks, like he's probably not a good defensive prospect. And there's
right.
so many countless examples of players not breaking or fitting this mold. But defense is definitely harder to evaluate with even on film as well, since there's so much more context missing than with offense. But
yeah, there's a ton of great hits there. I pulled up your data viz on the two-way impact while you were talking there, and can hit on that in a second here, but totally agree, and that's a great I think example and use case of what you're doing is creating something that we all know works at the pro level, at the NBA level, and now why not create that tool for other levels for evaluation when it's not out there, and like you're saying, like deflections basically are the hustle stat that leads to the blocks and steals
Yep.
unless you're gambling
Deflection,
for those
box
blocks and
outs,
steals,
position. Right, yeah, screen
those
assists,
hustle
all this stuff.
stats.
Tons of like stuff, and even like the public stats we have on that stuff. Like if you look into how those are tracked and charted, like, and as someone who does like who tracks and who hand tracks a lot of stuff myself, you'll realize like with whatever these public or private databases are, how like off a lot of this is. And I think that's just like part of any kind of tracking project. Like there's always human error involved, especially like when it's just one person, when it's just me. There's an unavoidable level of human error, and that's why I think people who like to troll on Twitter are like, oh, you're trying to make up stats. I'm like, no, not really. And if you ask me or have read anything I've ever written about this, I will very quickly tell you that this is ultimately a subjective, an attempt to quantify something that's subjective. But I do think it's valuable, and like this is what a lot of private facing, especially in other sports as well, is really common too.
Yeah, absolutely. Like you're creating a tool that is useful for scouting, and we all know it measures defensive impact and winning impact at different levels. And like I there's value in knowing like the schemes and who's gambling for those steals and blocks versus who's doing it within their role, and that can be hard to do without watching the tape and knowing the context of the team and the guy's role. So like someone
For
like
sure.
you putting in all that film work and all that grinding of the tape really helps like
Yeah.
form a little
And
bit
as
of that
I've
perspective
for sure.
too.
And as I've written about and mentioned in the explainer, I definitely think the defensive grades are probably less translatable than the offensive ones for that reason. And I'm excited to see, obviously. I mean, my biggest issue with the project is that I don't have any backfill and that I don't really know how it translates. I mean, that's like an impossible task, really, at the moment. But like you said, the defensive scores. I mean, for the grades, I just like scale everything out of 100, so it's easy to understand. But like the raw net plays scores are always going to be lower for defense, and one reason for that is just that defensive impact is less independent, less dependent on individuals. And you'll see this in like literally any impact metric ever, that the offensive RAPM, Darko, EPM, the top offensive numbers are going to be way higher than the top defensive numbers, right? And I think that's reflective of the fact that it is just impossible in the game of basketball, generally speaking, for individual defenders to impact the game like individual offensive players. So that doesn't mean there aren't, it isn't really important to have individual defensive ability. And for my grading, I leave a lot of like plays that I'm not sure about on defense as incomplete. And those are mostly things like either like off-ball communication, closeouts, point of attack defense. It's like there's so many different defensive schemes, and there's certain teams and schemes like Houston, Iowa State, where I've watched enough. I've watched them, their coaches interview, watch practices. I have a good enough feel for generally what they do on defense to know what they do. But like, I'm I'm not deep diving into, I don't know, like Auburn's defensive scheme.
Right.
So I'm not always going to be privy to what their calls are. So I'm going to leave a lot of plays that I think could be potential positive or negatives on defense blank, and I'll like note those in my notes, and like I'll have notes of them so I can go back and look at them or bring them up. But I try not to include them in the actual impact numbers because I only want to include data points that I'm 100 or as close to 100% confident in as possible. But I do still think, like, again, I think I think most people would agree that like Merez Johnson, Ademar, Caleb Wilson, Josh Jefferson, Darryn Peterson, Flory Badunga, Gongba, Krivas, Killian Torre, Moreno. Like, I feel pretty good about how the top of my defensive metric looks, just like one relative to stats and to people's perception of good defensive players are. Like, I think if you ask someone who the best defensive prospects in this class are, a fair amount of them I think will be covered towards the top of the metric, which I am proud about. And I think definitely the offensive side is probably more reflective of like what the top of the class are. But it was looking a little weird like early in the season, and the samples are still really small, but I've got, 200, 300 plus minutes in there for a good amount of the players. And the top of my grades is definitely reflecting like the top of my, like consensus boards as I kind of hope. So that's definitely nice.
Yeah, some great points there. I mean, like to the point on impact, I think that's a big one is we're at the point for many reasons, and it doesn't have to be a specific reason with offense, but there are individuals like a Steph Curry that can create more points and impact while on the floor consistently than an individual defender can create stops. But you want as many individual defenders to build that team defense to get stops as possible. So flanking Steph with those guys is probably a good idea.
Right. And it's just like
but
the idea
it's balance.
Like just looking at EPM for last year, like the offensive EPM leader was Jokic with a plus 7.8, and the defensive leader was Caruso with a plus 3.9. It's like a gigantic difference in raw number, but like those highest level defensive players in terms of impact metrics, whatever you want to kind of ascribe it to, are valuable, but just not as valuable as the high level offensive engines. There's a reason that Jokic, despite not being a stellar defender, same with like Luka, are the widely considered and truly MVP's best players in the world, because driving that elite offensive impact is just so important to me. And I think that's reflected with players like Boozer, Philon, Mikel Brown, Devansa, Flemings, Peterson, like all of the so many of the top players in the draft. I think this is not exactly a hot or controversial opinion to talk about just how stupidly loaded this class is on offense, but I also think on both ends it's really strong too.
Yeah, I mean it's just one of the best classes I've ever seen doing this, and something that we're gonna hit on. Like I think this is the deepest draft class with guards and guard talent I've ever seen, and maybe there's probably others that are competitive, but I mean there's just so many good ones.
I think 2018, but like that's a good. I think I probably do agree. I have to look back at it, but this is like I liked last year's guard class, but even last year's guard class I don't think was like particularly close to.
So here's some of the names on your sideways board just to put it in perspective of how many guards we're talking about. And there's names everywhere, but like just insane talent at the top, in the middle, and for depth. Like I want to say like 20 of, I'll have to look, but like I have 20 or 30 names in my top like 50, 60 guys that are all guards, and I'm really much higher on the guards than everyone in this class. Like, and there's kind of two flip sides to that. Like we've talked with some friends offline how that could like decrease the value of drafting guards in a sense in this class. But
I have 20 guards in my top 60, so.
Right, like just
that's a lot.
Insane. I have about. I mean, I'm
top 30. It's a crazy guard class.
Yeah, it's insane, and I think I'm counting some wings here that are like 2 3s by like just by accident or whatever. But I've got like 30, 35 in my whole top 60, and then like 20 in the top 30 or something. Like it's insane. So we'll be diving into that with the guard draft here in a second. Before we fully do, let's pull up the Swish Theory big board. There's a couple names I wanted to highlight, and really I just wanted to pick your thoughts on a few guys on the big board. Tyler Tanner, for one, he's one guy that Swish Theory is a little higher on than ESPN Top 100, but he is a guy that's getting a lot of love around draft circles and really everywhere. I caught your YouTube short breaking down his game. 6-foot guard with the dunks and the athleticism and the blocks. So tell me a little bit about, how he's moving up into a top 10 talks while, maybe not even being 6 feet tall.
Yeah, Tanner's awesome. I mean, I'm a little lower than, I think I had him like 15, 16 on my board, but that's still definitely higher than consensus regardless.
Yeah.
He does all of the things that compensate for, small guards. I think everyone kind of knows that small guards are out or they're not really in vogue in the NBA, but there's reasons for that, right? Like small guards aren't just bad because they're bad. They're bad because they're, vulnerable on defense. They often don't get to the basket as much and finish at the rim as much as, other players. They don't necessarily rebound like other guys, create turnovers, impact the game on defense, where Tanner does all of that. Like, he's an awesome athlete. He's an incredible drive creator. I'm not as crazy on his defense as maybe the Swish consensus might be. Like, I do think that's especially point of attack defense, where like he's an awesome off ball defender. His instincts, jumping passing lanes, feeling peel and veer switches, and even like rotating to protect the rim, like he's gonna get shot over. But I think even at the college level, you pretty often see how getting Tanner switched on to people really compromises the defensive shell. Like, they're forced to double, forced to trap, forced to be put in rotation because you have a 6-foot guy in the post against the big. And as incredible as Tanner's hands are, and I compared him or at least one of my comps for him was Reed Sheppard, who I think defensively, at least, there were a lot of similar strengths and weaknesses, like exceptional hands, reflexes, timing, but real size concerns. I think you see this at the NBA level. Like, Houston very routinely compromises their defensive shell when Sheppard is on defenders, is matched up to guys they don't want, but he's still able to find value and impact the game defensively. Like, he's not a horrible defensive player because of that. He's, elite deflections, all of that stuff. But yeah, Tanner, I think generally you're taking him that high for his offense. And his feel is special. I mean, his processing is crazy. He's such an amazing off-ball mover. His like instincts for little spaces and gaps and anticipating player movement is just really impressive to me. And obviously, he's a great shooter. Like, he's athletic. His intermediate game is probably like the main hole on offense. I'd like him. I have this concern for a lot of young guards, but I just need them to like chill out and calm down and play a little slower. Especially ones like Tanner and a lot of, really explosive, athletic, young freshman guards who, like, a lot of times they probably haven't had to play slow ever or, develop an intermediate game because nobody can stop them. And while at the college level for a guy like Tanner, I think that's still like generally true. He gets by everyone, but you do see like, I'd love to see him develop like a hop, a counter, a slower paced intermediate game. But yeah, Tanner's awesome. I think top 7 is rich, especially in this class, but I wouldn't totally hate it. And I think he's definitely a player worthy of lottery consideration, or like mid first round, is the sweet spot for me, where I'd love to take a guy like Tanner.
Yeah, no, I mean, like you're saying, the class is so deep, it's tough to necessarily, take him a little too high, but I have kind of flipped around back and forth on him, like very polarizing. And kind of like you said, like when you're an undersized guard, it's an uphill battle to be a winning basketball player in the NBA that's becoming a 6'6" plus league if you're trying to, play defense against guys that are 6 inches taller than you. And those are the point guards nowadays. So like, it is tough. You don't have to be Steph, right, but you have to bring like insane impact.
And yet there are still players at that size who are valuable playoff players. Like,
yeah, absolutely.
You don't see him super often, but like, look at what TJ McConnell did for the Pacers last year as a 6', 6'1" guard who can't really shoot because of his, ability to generate turnovers.
Mid-range pull-up.
Exactly. Score in the mid-range, generate rim pressure, all of that good stuff. Like, obviously, I think like Van Vliet and Lowry are classic examples.
Right.
Going back in history, I think one of the few guys who I think at that size who has the kind of juice that Tanner has. I'm like, there's some Ty Lawson in here, at least with like the downhill juice and like the bowling ball kind of nature. At least some offensive shades. And it's like, yeah, generally speaking, most small guards are not going to be impactful playoff players. But I think fading all small guards because of that fact is cowardly, honestly.
Right. Right. That defeats the purpose of what we're doing out here. And like if you're trying to scout and find guys, I think, FVV Fred VanVleet has mentioned as a quote many times, like the key is being tough and being able to hit threes. If you can be a D&3 small guard, you can probably find two-way impact. But also, those natural point guard skills are so underrated nowadays. If you can be a half-court playmaker setting the table for your team, so many teams still need that element, and it's not always a point forward, point center option that's best, even though you can still create good offense that way. Life might be a little bit easier if you had a Rondo run around setting it up, or CP3, of course, the ultimate, winner, smaller size point guard. A guy like Jalen Petty also comes to mind in these talks. Like he's jumped onto my board after popping out for Texas Tech against Flemings the other day, and just reminded me I caught him in the top 100 camp. It's great to see him ball out. He's a guy that makes winning plays and has that bounce and explosiveness as well as kind of a smaller guard. I was a little higher on Tanner on this board process after looking at the stats, but I'm kind of a little mixed myself. I submitted him at 9 in this round, but I kind of view him anywhere in this guard bunch that I'm still kind of deciphering by draft day. But sure. I did give him the credit of he's just having an absurd run to start the year and really taking the draft circles by storm, giving a little bit of nod to like this guy could be special. So let's keep an eye on him, and especially the numbers back it up on both ends for that level of guard. Was there? Let's see here. I think there was. Here we go. Here is one of your scouting profiles. Meleek Thomas. We'll get to him in the draft, but I just wanted to kind of shout out to the data viz that you're doing, and maybe you could break down kind of what the viz looks like here before we start the draft.
Appreciate it. Yeah, and like these are just kind of the easy like the scouting profiles that we do at Sportscasting, and they're designed for ease of like digestible information. So right. I mean, I have just like basic info, big board, position rank comparisons, and then like the skill score is more of just like to give people a sense of what players are good at, projecting forward rather than like a quality necessarily, because for and especially differs from positions. Like it doesn't matter if a player has what's the difference between a 9 or an 8 off ball scoring, or there are some players like I don't really care if or there's a reason I don't have like 3-point shooting on here, because I'm like there are certain prospects who don't shoot threes that I think are elite blue chip players, and they just don't need to for their role. So I think the kind of goal of this is mostly just to kind of visualize like where I think a player's strengths are, where their weaknesses are, where they can improve, rather than like a hard, analysis of each of the players. But
yeah, that's a good way to just kind of generally view things. And I think, we can get stuck in the nitty gritty sometimes too of trying to overanalyze certain things like that. So it's good to kind of get a generalization, at least to kind of see, maybe a guy's overall skill set, or compare certain profiles, his shot profiles, or just his play type, and general things like that. I'm a big fan of Meleek. He absolutely dominated that top 100 camp, and he's balling out for Arkansas, popping off some random nights as a scorer, shooter, just two-way field kind of guy. We'll probably get to him in the draft here. Was there anything else we didn't hit on before we dive in here to the draft?
No, I think all right. I think we hit it.
Let's do it then. The official 2026 NBA draft, guards only draft, with Ben Pfeifer here. I'm going to give you the first overall pick, and I know it could go a few different ways. We can kind of decipher who counts as a guard as we go, but generally speaking, we should probably count as few guards as possible and save some of them for a wing type of draft. So if they're a tweener, like a 2-3 type of wing, let's just kind of assume they're a wing. But, we can give a guy a nod. If you feel like giving him a nod, give him a nod, and then we'll move on maybe to the next one. But, it is a little unfair. I kind of have your big board in front of me, so I kind of know who you're going to draft. But, it's just a list of
maybe I'll
names.
switch it up. But
yeah, who knows? Who knows? We got a good list of names here to start. You can start us off with the number 1 pick.
I'll take Darryn Peterson.
Whoa! All right.
Thanks for giving me that. Oh.
Man, yeah. There it is. What makes Darryn Peterson? Why should he be the number 1 pick? Overall?
I mean, just like in the draft or in this draft?
Yeah, it just obviously we know he's the number 1 guard.
Yeah,
in the actual draft, what's his case over DeBonsa and Boozer for why people that I know you're really high on DeBonsa, and we're gonna count him as more of a wing on this class. Is he your number one or number two at the moment?
I've had Peterson number one for quite a while now, and I still do. I've felt, and I still do feel that any order of the top three is fine.
Yeah.
I slightly lean Peterson, one, because, as I've said for a long time, I think he's one of the best, if not like the best defensive guards in the class. I mean, he really can play more as like a wing on defense. He's an exceptional defensive player. His ability to, get steals and blocks and make rotations, his movement skills are awesome. His shot blocking for a guard is really exceptional. He's like a legit rim protecting threat as a 6'5", 6'6" guard. But I mean, he really is everything that you wanted to see. And what I like so much about Peterson is that he's kind of like taking on a different offensive role in a lot of ways at Kansas, like more off-screen stuff, more handoff stuff, more of that than we saw necessarily at like high school and college stops or AAU stops where he didn't have nearly as much talent. And all of his quote unquote weaknesses, I think, like, he's never going to be in Debansa, Caleb Wilson, Flemings level vertical athlete. But that's probably not as necessary given he has like the best touch ever. And his passing is not like, I don't know, Trey, Luka level, but I think it's plenty good for, his potential to be an initiator down the line. I think it's part of why I like Peterson. I think he can do, like, I don't want to box him in as like a combo or a two guard, like I think so many people are, because I've seen him play so much point guard and lead guard throughout his career, and I've seen the kind of high level passes he can make. But obviously, he's just like a god tier scorer. His shot making is insane. His off ball movement is crazy, and he has one of the best handles that I've ever seen from any player. And yeah, I mean, I think, well, like I said, honestly, I think for me, like, it kind of just like depends on what kind of flavor of player you want at the top. And it'll depend a lot based on like, what you're looking for, what your team looks like, what you're trying to build. But in a vacuum, if if the exercise is like, and this is generally how I try to think of like constructing a vertical board. It's not like the most useful thing. I think the horizontal board that you showed is much more like of an actual like useful tool for parsing a person's thoughts in the draft. But generally, I take the approach of like, if we were doing an expansion draft, who am I taking first? I have no team, I have no roster, I have no coach, I have no principles. I'm going to take Darryn because I think he has the potential to be an offensive initiator, one of the 2-3 best league guards in the league with more ancillary skills on both ends than the other two as well.
There it is. I mean, Peterson is electric. One of the best guard prospects.
Don't think there's anything particularly controversial in there.
Oh no, definitely not for the first guard pick. And I agree. I do think those three have still separated themselves in their own tier and really do depend on the situation as much as anything. And like, it is a pick your starter Pokemon situation for a new franchise.
Yeah,
like
as much as it ever has been, really. Right.
Like, you really like get a little bit of something different with all of them, and you can't go wrong. I still have Boozer up at the top just as this, two-way downhill force point forward, but it's been between him and DP, kind of flip-flopping really, 1 and 2 for me. And
because like I have Boozer pretty firmly third right now, but like I would be so happy taking a number 1, and I think he has the potential to be like a top 15, top 10 level player in the league. This just happens to be one of those drafts. But
yeah, it's just one of those all-timers. And Darryn Peterson, like you said, could be one of the best offensive and defensive guards in the league. Like, he could be a point guard, creator, scorer, nonstop walking bucket, offensive engine. Like, pick a fun name, and it applies to Darryn Peterson. Let's go to the number 2 pick in the guard draft. I'm gonna go with Kingston Flemings, who's on an absolute tear. I gotta do it. Another guy that is just so hard-nosed, like getting to the rack at will, like leading his defense as a voice of the defense, and just playing for Houston. Another walking bucket, like a guy I would want as one of the guards in the draft. I'm going to pull up your two-way graph here while we're talking again, and also the chart. I'll bounce around with the big board. But Flemings is over here with on the far right below Darryn Peterson, as one of the best offensive specialists, but still, up there for two-way impact as well, in the upper half as a positive defender. And I think that's so huge that, like, if you're a guard, and you don't have to be Patrick Beverley, but just being a positive defender makes such a big difference. Like if you can just hold your own, switch a little bit, and like not be picked on, kind of like we talked about before, like that, it's such a big difference to keep you out there when it matters most against a playoff level series where, you know, that's all a team is going to do over a series is pick on the worst defender. And it's not prevalent in every situation, but like it definitely happens at that level. So, you know, Fleming's just, sorry.
Yeah. I was gonna say, I think this is like our first 2 picks are pretty chalk. I think I think the defensive thing does put Fleming in a different tier from the other guards to me. I mean, whereas I think like Mikel, Philon, Stirtz, less over Stirtz maybe, but like and Tanner, and I guess Tanner and Acuff are the ones, but like there are ways or Stirtz and Acuff. I mean, there's ways I can see them surviving on defense, but like Flemings has the tools to be a legit plus, and I don't think he's a particularly consistent defensive player at the college level. Houston runs a tough scheme. And there's a lot of moving parts, but you can pretty clearly see his abilities. Like even in that crazy Texas Tech game that he had on Saturday, like it was mostly offensive stuff, but he had a really nice play where like tagged the roll and he stole the ball and it went the other way. He had a rotation on a broken play to like cover the rim and force a miss. So I think Fleming's, while like certainly the level of offensive player these other guards are, like he's not perfect by any means. I think he's a little like stiffer than I'd love. His interior passing on the move is not perfect, but it's hard to like, I feel like most of the Fleming's issues are nitpicks, I feel like. And when I'm thinking, and when a prospect, I'm thinking about the issues and I'm just nitpicking, I'm like, yeah, they're probably stamped. But
right. And to your point, Cerebro has him at a 90 defensive DSI stat, 2 steals a game at the college level. That's really high for a guard, the 90 rating. That's an elite type rating. And he's just, you know, a floor general that can score, shoot, and defend. Hard to find a guard as complete as that. And like the nasty handle, the burst.
It's so easy to project him as like a lead guard at the next level, but also like he's a good team player. Like he's a great close-in attacker. Right. He's a great spot-up shooter. Like he makes quick decisions off the ball. Just very much not your average true freshman point guard. And you know, we'll say that for a lot of players, but I think Fleming's more than the rest, I think is truly just outlier in the stuff that he can do.
Yeah, absolutely. And like popping off for a great Houston team and continues to explode for big nights. He was one of those 3 names that popped off for 40 points along with Tabonsa and Wagler on Saturday night. So definitely, you know, I think he's. Now let me ask you one question before we move on. Has he jumped up to like clear number 4 or 5 pick for you, right there with Caleb Wilson? And I think you're high on Quaintance as well, around that range.
I've lowered a little bit on Quaintance just because I'm getting scared a little bit about his health stuff, especially like this time is just so important for a player's development, and like missing it is just a little scary. But like, I think for me, after Debansa and Boozer, it's Flemings and Wilson in a tier. I'd still take Wilson over Flemings, but that's another one where I think depending on what you're looking for, team wise, timeline wise, you could flip that, and I'm not going to be upset either way.
Yeah. I could see that. Quaintance reminds me just a little bit of Jonathan Isaac in the good and the bad there when it comes to the defense first archetype and maybe a little bit of the injury stuff, but it's definitely a guy to keep an eye on. Like incredible talent as a defender, and Yaxel has.
I love him to play.
Yeah, we just want to see him play. That's the big one.
I think he's only played like 3 or 4 games, and he was exceptional in one of them and bad in the others. It's just like a tough place to be with a guy who, especially like as a 17-year-old in college basketball last year, it's like, oh yeah, I am ranking him high with the assumption that he's going to improve at the things that a lot of teenagers improve on. And we just haven't seen that yet. So I'm not like all the way out on Quaintance or anything. I'm just a little more tepid than I once was. But of course, I think with Quaintance, it's like more of a TBD than anything, just because there's so much incomplete information. So,
right. No, I feel you. I have Yaxel jumping into that conversation too with his complete game, just the incredible defense, and kind of moving up into that conversation of that 4 through 6 tier for me. Just incredible versatility, I think. I'm not sure if you're quite that high on him, but
No, I'm
he's
not.
just got a
But
lot of tools. Yeah, he's just got a lot of tools.
your Yaxel opinion seems to be more consensus than mine, to be fair.
Okay, well, what's the down on Yaxel just for the reason not to draft?
He's incredibly old, and I think that it does actually matter. Not like so much to totally fade someone, but the
For
main
long-term
issues I have,
potential.
the main yeah, but the more pressing Yaxel issues I have are, I think defensively his steal and block numbers are great, and he's amplified by a great scheme. But I think his like clunkiness and movement skills do kind of concern me. Um, and I'd like to see the 3-point shooting sustained for a little longer. That like, I mean, he's 64 for 188, 34% from three in 3 college seasons, shooting 78% at the line. It's not like a bad shooting profile or anything, and he looks like a shooter on tape. But it's also not the kind of thing where I'm like, oh yeah, this guy's going to be an elite shooter in the NBA. I'm 100% on that. But I think those are kind of. I still view him as like a potential lottery guy. To be clear, I don't. I just think, especially in this class, with like so many intriguing star bets, I'm like, I just take my swings elsewhere. But Yaxel, another one where like hard to rank him on a big board because like, you know, some teams in some positions, you know, might have Yaxel like top 5, and others in, you know, less competitive positions might not even consider it. So
Yeah, no, that's a great point. I think his defense steal numbers and the feel and the instincts there with the rebounding and some of the blocks are good, and there is some all around versatility, but it's not like none of it's jumping off the page. It's just all like solid.
Learning Basketball is a Swish Theory podcast hosted from Beyond the Arcade. Hey, that's me. You can find my work on Twitter, YouTube, Substack, and check out the team's writing at theswishtheory.com.
The last thought on Yaxel was that, you know, maybe your data viz is kind of showing how some of the more traditional stats like steals might be inflating his defensive impact a little bit compared to some of these other guys where he's not necessarily at the very top of the defensive impact. While he is positive or average at it, he might not be off the page, and if that's the case, that would kind of change things. But what still stands out is the versatility of his game, where he has much more offensive skill set than some of these defensive-minded guys.
for sure.
And it might not be, you know, like you said, it doesn't have to be perfect as long as it's kind of a projection of where, if a guy like one thing that I think the whole point of this chart is if a guy makes winning plays, that translates to every level. And if you can recognize winning basketball plays at this level, and he has the tools to do it at the next level, those are good things to bet on for future winning players. And this guy's doing it on both ends.
I think this is like exactly where he ends up on this chart. It just like feels really good for where I kind of how I feel about him, which I guess makes sense since this is literally the quantification of my film watching. But yeah, I mean, I think he's like, again, like 60th percentile ish offense and defense, and part of that is all of the Michigan guys I think are a little skewed. One, because of each other, and two, because of just how like these guys beat the brakes off of everyone and don't play as many minutes as everyone else. So like, I think like I have Mara first, which I think is, I love Ademara, but part of that is because he plays 23, 24 minutes a game and is able to exert more, you know, expend more energy impacting the game than if he had to play 40 minutes and avoid fouling and stay on the floor. So I think like it's just this like crazy outlier Michigan team makes things weird because of just how dominant they are. But yeah, like I just think, yeah, like this class especially, there's so many players who I think have enormous ceilings and can really be like franchise-changing stars. Whereas Yaxel, I just don't think has that. Even though if I think he's gonna be like a good player, like I compared him to like, I don't know, I think he could impact in the NBA like a Keegan Murray kind of. Different players. Keegan was a much better shooter coming out. Probably, definitely Yaxel's more of a playmaker. But I think we've seen like rookie year Keegan when the Kings were great, he was phenomenal as like an off-ball shooter, big complementary defender, and then it's not been as great when the Kings haven't been as good. And I think Yaxel is going to be the same kind of player where like on good to great teams, you're really going to notice him. And on bad to mediocre teams, you're probably not going to notice him as much. And again, that's just like, I think most of the teams picking at the top of the draft probably fall in that second bucket, but obviously not always. Like you have years where like the Spurs or whatever are picking top 3 with Wemby and Harper, but
yeah, no, that's a great point. That
generally speaking, obviously always exceptions, and like if the Spurs get top 5 pick and take Yaxel, I'm not going to hate it, but
yeah, no, I feel you. Like there
Nets
are teams that are looking for potential.
Like if the Nets take Yaxel, I'd criticize that. But if the Spurs took them, I'd be like, that's fine. They're not looking to develop players as much. They need plug and play. So it's all just, that's why like just the vertical big board is a content tool more than anything else,
Yeah, that's a great point. When the big board really is kind of more for like the consensus viewer to have an idea of generally who the best guys available are, but like that helps for the ESPN broadcast, but like the people actually making the decisions aren't just picking the top guy off that board. And a ton of factors, like you just said, like there are teams that need winning players around their stars more than they need stars, and the draft is generally the best way to find young future stars, especially for teams that don't have other ways to acquire those stars. So, generally speaking, you want to use the top of the draft.
If OKC gets a top 8 pick and takes Yaxel, nobody would complain. Like
you're just another winning player.
Yeah, but that's most teams. I think OKC will have no expectation for Yaxel to become a star or anything close. They don't need that. Like that's probably not gonna happen. He's just like not gonna have the runway to develop into a star in OKC. But like, so like he doesn't need to, right? He could be a perfectly valuable, impactful, two-way player. But so I think I think that's all part of why like the draft is so fun and difficult, right? Like it's hard to really parse all this stuff, but.
Yeah, that's what makes it fun. And so with I think we're on the 3rd pick. We're bouncing around some drafts, and we'll speed it up as it goes a little bit. But I think we're on the 3rd pick for guards. Darryn Peterson and Kingston Flemings are officially off the board. So at the moment, as of January 26th, who is the 3rd pick in the guards only draft?
For me, it's still Mikel Brown. But I think now is when there's a bunch of different directions that you could go. I have like 3 or 4 guards in the same tier as I have Mikel. But ultimately, I think he's just the best offensive player of the group, probably. And like it's compared to guys like Stirtz and Acuff or, not Tanner. Like I think Mikel has the size to project defensive growth. But I think Mikel is... maybe besides Stirtz, probably the best like on-ball passer in the class. Like his pick and roll playmaking is truly absurd. His vision, his creativity, his anticipation, exceptional shooting prospect as well. And like my big issues with Mikel coming into the draft were his slashing ability, his ability to generate free throws, get to the paint, get downhill. And I think he's clearly improved there since his last high school season and his AAU season, where he's drawing a bunch of fouls, he's getting downhill, and he's never going to be like he's never going to be Kingston Flemings or even Darryn Peterson to that extent. But he doesn't need to be, like he's bursty, he's sudden, he's not a crazy explosive or powerful player. But I think Mikel, just like the blend of elite off dribble / off movement shooting and playmaking is a star thing. That's where stars come from, right? I think those two traits often blend to form star offensive players, and that's exactly what I see for Mikel Brown, where I think he is going to be a good enough like off-ball shooter, like closeout attacker to fit next to a bigger initiator. Like I think he'd be so perfect in Dallas next to Cooper. Like that would be unbelievably good for them. And I don't think he's necessarily like the level of like lead guard like a Peterson or like maybe a Flemings are, but his just really just the blend of shooting and passing make him the next pick for me here.
There it is. That's a great pick. I probably just need to I guess watch more tape on Mikel
He's
because I
also
have
been
a much.
he's also been injured too. So like kind of like
Yeah, I
out of
haven't. Yeah,
he's
so
only
it's
played what is it like 3 or 4 like high major teams. So I understand some of like the tepidness with him, but I do think he's going to continue to prove himself like a pretty undeniable in that range kind of player as he progresses. I mean, I believe he just came back for like his first game in a while since like December on Saturday as well, and he had I guess pedestrian 20 and 6, relative to the rest of his peers on Saturday, but like
right. It didn't make the breakout performances, but honestly should have been on the list. That is a good game, and
no, I mean relative to like I mean it's not even like a top 6, 7, 8 performance statistically.
Yeah, I mean that's
crazy because
it
was
is
objectively great.
right, especially for someone coming back,
Right,
just
yeah,
working back
exactly.
in, and he's a McDonald's All-American. He's a big name. He's a 3-point shooter, and that should be a special skill that translates to the next level. I can definitely see betting on that and ancillary skills from there. With the 4th pick, I'm going with my guy Ebuka Okorie. I'm all in on this guy in this draft. Like he is, talk about a walking winning play. Like he's just one of the smartest like two-way feel point guards I think in the whole draft. I caught him live at a Mount Verde tournament on Brewster Academy, and like the guy has just showed off his insane finishing with every shot possible at the rim, natural point guard skills, that quick first step burst, and the ability to hit the open 3 and just make good decisions, winning plays throughout. Like at first, the first guy that came to mind was a little bit of Schroeder to his game with that quick burst and the finishing at the rim. But then like the more he was showing his feel for the game, like a little Rondo came to mind too. What are your thoughts on Ebuka Okorie here?
Yeah, I like Ibuka. I'm definitely not this high on him. I have him in like the 20s.
Yeah.
Just because I think he has like a lot more of the small guard limitations to me compared to a guy like Tanner, where Okorie is like defensively, to me, quite shaky. And I think he's a solid passer, but I don't view him as anything particularly special. Like he can make basic pick and roll reads. He's comfortable, hitting the roller, lifting to the wing off of a tag. But I don't think you particularly see him making high level, interior reads off the dribble. But his scoring, man, is just ridiculous. And I think for me to project small guards as stars at the next level, they have to get easy buckets off the dribble. And I think that's one of my big concerns with a guy like Darius Acuff, as good as he is. Darius Acuff, Meleek Thomas, Christian Anderson, a lot of these guys, I think, share these issues to me, where they don't generate a ton of easy looks off the dribble. And I think that is an indication of, it's only going to get harder at the NBA level, right, to generate easy looks. But Okorie is not that way. Like, he has an unbelievable handle. His burst is exceptional. He can really shoot. And while I think Okorie is definitely riskier than some other guard bets in this class, I do think he has a higher ceiling than a lot of players who are being mocked over him. So for me, I see Okorie as like a high variance upside bet that I definitely understand high, even if I'm not necessarily that high on him. But he is very good, and I do definitely view him as a potential first round player. Because he just is an absurd scorer, and like he truly does everything for that crappy Stanford team. Like they just don't have a lot of talent, and I think in so many, even like his bad games, like he was pretty horrible in that Duke game. But you can just see the way that like he gets trapped and blitzed, and he's probably not going to see that kind of coverage at the NBA level. At least not early on in his career. But yeah, Okorie is awesome. I don't necessarily view him as like a top 10 level guy in this class, but I don't know. I mean, I'd probably take him. I'd probably hear a case for him top 10 in like 2020, top in like 2022 or something. I'd probably be happy with him that high. But I do like Okorie.
Right. Just for sure. I mean, it's a loaded class. It's understandable. There's a lot of different ways you could go, and What stood out, I did catch him on like an absolute great event in person, so definitely impressed in person. Just so
The small
there's always a little bias there at play as well. On in terms of like
Also will note that
couldn't have played much better.
my grading system leans closer to you than to me on Okorie, for what it's worth. So
That's what we want to hear. Is he? That's what I was going to ask. I'm not sure if I saw his name on the chart. Is he one of these other circles?
He's one of those pink dots that I just didn't highlight. That's just not highlighted. He's in the offensive specialist range. I think he's probably. I mean, I have it pulled up
like
right now.
Above Tanner, probably
around there. Right now, I have him graded 14th overall. Out of, I think I have like 66. Yeah, I have 67 prospects graded right now. I have him 14th overall. I have him 10th offensively. So
there you go.
I think that, and I haven't done as many of his bad games. I mean, to be fair, he hasn't had that many bad games. Like I have the Duke game in there, which definitely drags things down a little bit. And he's had a couple other underwhelming games, but even then, I think like he is the kind of player who, because of like all of the attention he sees on defense, I'm willing to excuse a lot more of like the negative plays that he has.
Yeah, and he might be one of these guys that's more of a feel type of stealer, like a gambler that it can be a little smart about it, because he does have a history of a lot of steals throughout like all his events and throughout the career. He's in 87 this year, a DSI for Cerebro, 1.5 steals a game. In the event I caught him at, he was like number one player in the whole event, 2 steals and a block a game, 97 DSI rating, and just a walking bucket scorer, finisher at the rim. The finishing really stands out. Like he can finish any shot you can think of at the rim, and that when you combine like the quick first step burst with the finishing to do that, with the 3-point shot, it's just a very complete offensive like guard type game, with very nothing to pick on offensively. And if he can, like you said, not get picked on defensively at the next level and can kind of use those smarts to round out his two-way feel, like that's kind of the guard I'm betting on in at this point in the guards only draft. So that puts you up with our 5th overall pick of the guards only draft.
I think I'm just gonna keep following my board and take LaBaron Philon.
There you go. Oh man, that's like one of my guys right there. That's a great pick. I would have taken him next.
Yeah, I got to get him off the board. I mean, I was a big fan of him last year as a freshman. I probably would have taken him in the lottery if he had stayed in the draft. But same. I think going back was ultimately the right move for his development, and he is very clearly a better basketball player than he was in meaningful ways last year. And like he's so much stronger than he used to be. He's so much more physical and controlled on drives. I think his finishing is never going to be like exceptional by any means. Like it's very efficient right now, but I think part of that is because he gets a good amount of like manufactured rim attempts via like Gortat screens, and he's really good at like using jail and his own pacing to create open shots at the rim. And like that's not obviously a knock on Philon, like that's a positive to me, but I think probably some evidence he's not like this elite finisher at the basket, and you can kind of see that when you like he's not crazy explosive. He will sometimes like force up tough shots, but we're talking about the blend of explosiveness, change of speed, great pick and roll passing, and his off dribble shooting is so much improved this year. I mean, you can just see the overall shooting numbers are so much better, but he's like pulling confidently off the dribble from NBA range this year. And something that I do like about Philon compared to like your average elite offense, bad defense point guard is just like he's been more impactful on defense in the past. Like he entered college as kind of like a 3-and-D-ish. Like he was probably, I mean, it's not. I don't think this says like that much. Like it was like Mark Sears and Aiden Holloway. I think it's clearly the Chris Youngblood. He was the best defensive guard on the Alabama team as a freshman. Not that they had a ton of competition, but he's just like so weak and frail and still gets thrown off by screens. But I think there's at least like stuff to project for Philon. He's got quick hands. He can, when he gets skinnier on screens and doesn't get clipped, it looks really impressive. And yeah, I think Philon should absolutely just be in this conversation with probably, like we said, a tick below Flemings, definitely Peterson, obviously. But with these potential initiator point guards, like I think his offense is that good, honestly, and has been that good at Alabama to consider him like that.
Yeah, and what's crazy is I am this high on him really because of a lot of the winning play type defensive tools he's already shown at the earlier seasons, and like all the scoring you just described is like a total like flip on how I kind of viewed him as more of that two-way type prospect in general. So it just adds to his developable ball skills. Like he's literally 1 or 2 on your chart in offensive impact in
He's number
some of
one.
these huge games. Yeah, and just offensively, what goes like I can picture winning plays, and we've definitely talked about winning plays defensively, the hustle stats, the deflections and loose balls, and
Mm.
when I think of Philon, it's similar to a few of these other guys like Okorie, and even on the defensive side, it's how I would view a guy like Otega Owe or Dante Allen, who I might hit on a little later, is just like a walking winning play. Like these guys just make winning plays every 5 minutes. The announcer is saying their name because they broke away for a steal and a breakaway layup because it's just what they do. So what is some of the impact grades thinking about for offensive impact on top of the obvious stuff that,
Sure.
scoring, shooting, passing? Are there any like winning plays that are not really tracked, I guess, that you're really
Philon,
emphasizing?
yeah, I'd say the majority of the Philon stuff comes from advantage creation. That's just not necessary. I mean, again, 31.6 usage, 62 true shooting, massively positive assist to turnover ratio, draws fouls, 61% on twos. Like it's not like a huge mystery as to why he grades so well. But I think the thing that to me separates Philon from some of these other point guards in the class are really impressive offensively, this is the way that he's able to separate from defenders with his handle, with his quickness, with his burst, with his change of direction and change of speed. He is like a very fast player, but there's a lot of very fast players. I think his special sauce to me is the way he changes speeds and directions. Like I think that's a fairly notable-ish worry for like a Kingston Flemings, who's just so fast that I think, even Tanner we touched on earlier, but Philon, especially this year, so under control, so well paced. And, I think he has that tough shot gene now where you see him making and taking more of those, but he doesn't need to rely on that. He's a dynamic downhill athlete. And just the fact that he is creating so many shots, again, there's plenty of plays where like he'll split a pick and roll, get to the middle, kick to an open player in the corner who shoots or doesn't shoot or whatever, right? So, but regardless of the outcome of that play, the process to get there is valuable. And Philon just does that so much more than many of the other guards in this class. And I think that's, to me, why he's such an exceptional offensive player. Like, I don't actually think he's the best offensive player in the class, but I think he's, just based on this season so far, I mean, the basic, the, quote unquote, real stats alone, I don't think are can tell you that he's having an exceptional offensive season. Like there are very few like high major players his age in Bartorvik history, at least, who have hit like the 30 plus usage, 60 plus true shooting. But that's tough.
I mean, yeah, like just a well-rounded profile that, efficiency across the board, 53% from the field, 38% from three, 5.5 threes, 60% shooting, EFG percentage, only 73% from the line, but 6 free throws a game, 64% true shooting, 2.0 assist to turnover ratio with 5 assists a game. And, just a really well-rounded profile. Like that's, that not to compare their games, but like that's what stood out about a guy like Shea in the draft process is just like every box was checked. Like there was just one of those guards that just brings efficiency all around and winning plays all around. And, those are good things to bet on when guys are just good at a lot of things and great at certain things. Like, and this is one of those guys where, like you said, like the change of direction, the athleticism, I think his combination of that athleticism in his body with the two-way feel is just a walking winning play, as we've talked about before. Really huge on Philon. And these guys, I think this is kind of a separator for me at this point in the guards draft. Like looking at the list of names, like I really feel pretty confident about those top 4 guys. I'm not as high on Mikel as you, but those 4 like make me feel really confident in the guards at this point. I'm going to throw 3 names at you, and let me know. Do you think all these guys should just be small forwards and keep? Make it 4 names: Keaton Wagler, Matt Abel, Miles Bird, and Dalen Swain. Should we count them all as wings?
Those guys are all wings to me, personally.
Okay. So just for the sake of this draft, go ahead. Tell me why, if you want. But
it definitely differs by player. I think Wagler has like the strongest claim to be a guard.
Yeah, with the on-ball, the pull-up shooting, but
But I think like he still has wing size. And I think wing physicality, importantly.
Yeah. Like, you are what you guard, I think, is kind of that point.
For sure.
And you have a lot of offensive skill sets. You can run the point on offense, but like that's where like a point forward phrase comes from to me.
Like
you're a forward, you're guarding threes.
An awesome on-ball player, but like I don't project him as like a point guard at the next level. Like he's a very good passer for a freshman wing, but I think he's clearly limited. Like he is a physical, elastic, skilled driver, but he's like not constantly creating advantages or handling pressure like quote unquote point guards do. But like it doesn't mean I don't think he's awesome. I just it's just a difference in classification. And like you said, especially for like Swain and Burt, like these guys are defending 4s at times. So
exactly that. And they're on your list here as like off guard wings. I think there's a case, some lineups they can be 2s. But, generally they could also be 3s and 4s. So we're just going to count them as wings for this case. So I think at this point, I kind of have to take Tyler Tanner. And if I don't, then I would go with one other guy that I'm really high on, and Dante Allen, that I don't think is as consensus there. And it's probably a little biased. I've seen him a ton. I've gotten to talk to him. Great head on his shoulders. I really love his game. But he is just another guy that is a walking winning player. And when he is sticking to his game as like Dante, as like a catch and shoot 3 guy, a hustle player, a connector guard, downhill force type guard. Like he's just one of the strongest 2-way guards in the class to me. And I said early on, like I see a little bit of Desmond Bane to what he does. And if he can just round out those strengths of his game, I think there's a complete skill set that puts him in these conversations just in a very loaded guard class. That all-around skill set is a guy I just want to shout out in this phase. So I'm going to make I guess I would take Dante here, but I have to take Tyler Tanner, I think, because of how we've been talking about him. So I'm taking Tyler in the draft. And then I'm just going to put a little like shout out Dante in parentheses at this pick, because I don't really think you're going to take him. So I'm just going to shout him out here.
I'm not. So you can shout him out.
I assume not. So we're going to skip. We talked Tyler already. Shout out Dante. 6, 7 in our hearts. Hopefully on the big board soon. 7th pick in the guards draft. You are now up.
I'm gonna take Bennett Stirtz, who I think is the clear best guard left on the board. Right. Who I'm maybe not as high as like some draft Twitter people, who are like crazy high on like him. I've seen him like top 5, top 6, but like I have him in like the back end of my top 10 late lottery range. And he's one of these guys where it's like my valuation of feel and processing, it would be, inconsistent to have him lower, considering I think he has a case as the highest field player in this entire class. Like the way that he reads the floor, the speed at which he makes decision. And I think this has been talked a lot. I think in our circles, plenty of people have talked about Sturtz's conditioning and his ability to not only like play all 40 minutes of important games and run offense through him, but like the mental conditioning to consistently make good decisions and put teammates in positions to succeed. And his shooting is also phenomenal. Like he's an incredible shot maker. I will never forget the floater 3 he hit against my Missouri Tigers in the tournament last year. But like I think plays like that are evidence of just like the crazy touch he has, the ability to make shots off balance. And like Sturtz is like a weird one because he's like not a super dynamic like rim creator downhill. I think he's pretty clearly the worst defender of the lottery top 20 quality point guards to me. Like definitely worse, I think, than Tanner. Definitely worse than Flemings, Peterson. I think even like Brown has more size to project. Same with like even Philon. But defensively, I'm concerned for sure. But I just think his offense is so good that I'm willing to take him top 10, top 14, because I do really think in the right situation, Stirtz could return like sub all-star-ish level value just through offensive impact.
Wow.
And he's also one where I'm just so fascinated to see, because he plays in such a unique system, like maybe more unique than almost any other prospect, with not only like his offensive load, but just like the way they get their buckets, how slow they play. He certainly has run like more give and goes than like anybody in college history. He's just a very unique player. And I think that makes him hard to place. But I tend to be into players like him who are unique and are weird and don't have easy approximates, because I think those are often guys who become stars. But I think there's definitely downside for Stirtz as well. But I'm happy taking Stirtz at this stage.
Yeah, no, that's a great shout. This is another like cutoff point in kind of the tiers I have as well when it comes to the guards. And agree with a lot of what you said. Like he popped out last year at Drake with just absurd impact, and now doing it all at Iowa. Just clearly a natural point guard, can run the pick and roll and score at will. And that's high praise. You still have, even down on some aspects of his game, like saying all-star level upside, like is no joke for this class. So, he still separates himself from the rest of these guards to you for those reasons.
For sure. And I think he's also like a hard one. Like he doesn't grade super well by like my impact stuff, but I do think that's pretty directly related to the fact that he plays so many minutes. Like it's just really hard to exert the same level of like play to play impact when you're playing 40 minutes a game and are required to do all of like the heavy lifting that you are. But I think the players who do play 30, 32, 33 plus minutes a game, like Cameron Boozer and Kingston Flemings and Tyler Tanner, who can consistently do this, are like star level guys. Maybe Tanner less so, but yeah, Stirtz is just such a unique one. But I tend to just like the skills that I'm into, the skills and the things that I really value for translation. Stirtz just has all of what I want. And just, the fact that he is a little bit older, like probably keeps him out of like the top tier of guards for me. Like if this was a true freshman or even like a 20-year-old doing the kind of thing that Stirtz is doing in the Big Ten, I think we're having different conversations. But.
Yeah, that's all fair. And to your point, like about Ademera earlier for Michigan, like having it's a lot easier to kind of show huge impact and make full effort plays in less minutes than having to kind of carry the load for a team night to night, 35 minutes a night, and like guys maintaining that high efficiency on high volume, like a Boozer and Tanner and everything. That's what makes them these top type of picks here. So glad you gave us a shout to Stirtz here. I'm going with Meleek Thomas, walking bucket with the 8th pick in the 2026 guard draft. I'm glad he was still on the table. I would have, just to be clear, Okorie, Philon, Dante Allen, and Bennett Stirtz kind of in that middle tier for me. And Tyler Tanner, I'm still deciding on, but statistically I had him above all of them. But in reality, I would probably draft him kind of closer to this range, I think, at the moment, because of some of the things we've talked about. But, it's a process that I don't have to turn in my homework until, June 3rd, 2026,
true.
Like, so like very, I have a little,
very true. Something I think people don't think about enough.
Yeah. And like, I think it's important for me, like, to put out everything I've seen so far and where I'm at now. And like, if I have to see 5 more guys by the draft day, that's cool. Like I will change my opinion on the fly to new information, but
for sure.
I think it's important to like there's a ton of guys and a ton of change that things happen by the night, so you don't want to overreact game by game to one small sample either. You want to kind of put out a full perspective on all these guys and watch tape on them, as much tape at as many different levels as possible, and the more information the better, I think, in general, to as long as you can parse through it in a good way. But with Meleek Thomas, like he's a walking bucket, one of the toughest shot makers I've seen in this class. Like he can finish from anywhere, he can take shots from anywhere. I've compared his like natural shot making to like a Jamal Crawford type out there, where like it just looks effortless. Like it's hard to see a guard make scoring so easy, and then hasn't fully taken over or anything in this Arkansas backcourt. We've seen a lot of Darius Acuff as well, who is probably going to get picked here in a minute at some point, but he that's another guy I'll let you talk about too. But two tough guards. Meleek stands out to me for his tough shot making, really tight handle, the 3-point shooting, and two-way feel. Like he's another guy that can make smart plays on the defensive end and time up steals. He's averaging 1.6 steals per game at Arkansas, hitting 40% of his threes as well. I think those are how he rounds out two-way impact as like at least a 6-man at the next level, and with some starter potential if he can find that two-way impact. We're at the point in the draft where like there might be a flaw or two, like maybe even though he reads and reacts to defenses well, I don't consider him a point guard. Like there's a reason you have him as a combo guard here. Like he can do both, but he's looking for his shot, generally speaking, and reading and reacting. But I think it's a little bit like Trey Johnson last year, where like I don't want to negate the playmaking either. Like just because he's offensive hungry, like looking for his own shot, like doesn't mean he can't pass either. Like he can make those reads. And so if there is unselfishness there, where you can kind of build an offensive hub out of that, like you have a possible scoring option, like top 3 level scoring option, an elite potential 3-point shooter, tough shot maker who can create his own shot off the dribble, and is a kind of a bigger guard that can defend a little bit too and create steals, force turnovers. All of that adds up to like winning plays and tough shot making and 3-point shooting. I think he's a guard, just a talent I would make a bet on in this 2026 NBA draft class. What are some of the limitations maybe on Meleek? And you also seem to have him pretty high here as well.
I like Meleek. I think he'd be a good like late first swing, like you said. I comped him to Gary Trent Jr. For work, and I like that as like just like a proxy for impact. It's like a guy who makes his money hitting shots and nabbing steals, and I think like I like the defensive comparison, because like Trent is definitely not as good of a defensive player as his steal numbers would indicate, and I think Meleek is absolutely the same way. Like he has good instincts, he's long, I think you can project improvement there, but on like a play-to-play basis, I think he's definitely not that great of a defender at the moment, as is the case with a player like Gary Trent, who gets beat a ton and makes a ton of mistakes, but still finds ways to get on the floor. And yeah, I think Meleek is a pretty pure 2-guard to me. I just don't think he has the ability to pressure defenses all the way downhill. His passing is definitely more of like a combo guard passer. Like he'll like react to help and make a lob pass, or like swing the ball out of pick and roll, but he's not making like high level advanced reads. Like he's not like his teammate Darius Acuff by any means in that regard. But he's very large. He's not like crazy. He's kind of a weird athlete, because like I hesitate to call him bad, because he is very flexible and elastic, and like his movement skills are nice. He's just not explosive at all, which I think hurts his ability to like. And you see this showing up in poor rim frequency and efficiency. He doesn't really draw fouls, and that stuff definitely matters to project. I think people are like, oh, he's like a point guard because he passes and he runs pick and roll. It's like, no, point guards do so many more things than that. Like point guards have to be able to handle pressure and to create against different kinds of coverages and to break defenses with their paint pressure and to, do stuff like that. I just don't think Meleek is necessarily a player who has that in his bag, but that's fine. I think he could be a very solid NBA player. And he's definitely one of the, if I'm a team that, I trust my development infrastructure, I don't necessarily need him to impact winning today. I'm very cool with taking Meleek as like a developmental bet. I view him very like opposite to Acuff in that way, who I think is just like very good and solid, but I don't see a crazy ceiling with.
Okay. Yeah, no, I'm going to say something that might sound a little crazy about Meleek, but like his mentality really stood out to me. Like it was like watching a Kobe or something, in terms of the hungry hungriness out there. When I got to see him live, like it was at Top 100 camp, and you got to add the caveat of the competition levels. It's almost like an all-star event in that sense, but it's a camp. But this is still the top 100 guys in the league at the time, give or take, at that level. And Meleek wanted to show how great he was and was hungry to do it, and he was the player of the event by far. And him and Cenac both balled out actually, but he was just on another level, leading in steals and assists and scoring. And like you said, definitely more of a 2-guard running pick and rolls, not a natural point guard out there doing it. But can kind of, in my opinion, you're betting on the shooting, scoring, and defensive playmaking, and hopefully a little bit of a well-rounded game out of that is kind of what you're betting on talent-wise.
I was going to take Acuff next anyway.
All right, perfect. So with the 9th pick, you got Acuff. Yeah. All right, perfect. So with the 9th pick, you got an Arkansas teammate of Meleek.
I view him and Meleek fairly similar in terms of value, in terms of how much I like them as prospects, but in completely different ways. Where Meleek has a lot of glaring offensive weaknesses. I think there's real potential for growth, but also very clear limitations that make me very unsure on how I think Meleek is going to do. It wouldn't shock me if he's out of the league in 3 years. Not at all. But it also wouldn't shock me if he was, a decently impactful player in 3 years. Whereas Acuff, I expect to be a solid player, but I would be pretty surprised if he ever became a real offensive star. And I kind of alluded to with the Okorie stuff, and we talked about with Flemings and Mikel, to be a real star point guard at the NBA level, to me, you need to generate easy buckets off the dribble, need to get to the basket to do that effectively. And Acuff just doesn't really have that, but he is an exceptional shooter. His ball handling is incredible. He's not a special playmaker to me, out of structure. He's great. He's a great pick and roll passer. He's an amazing lob passer. And, playing with Trevon Brazile and Billy Richmond and all these above the rim threats at Arkansas obviously helps that. But he's a very good pick and roll passer. I think he's great handling traps and handling pressure. But I definitely don't see him as a driver of offense at the NBA level like he is in college. And I think has a real case as one of the worst defensive players in the entire draft, which mattered a lot. I think where with Tanner, we talked about with, even Mikel, with some of these guys, there's ways to project them. And Acuff at least has strength. I think that's probably if you're going to make an optimistic case, Acuff is strong. He's physically well built and he can absorb contact, but it's tough for me. Again, doesn't really generate turnovers, not particularly interested in playing defense. I think that's pretty clear from watching Arkansas play. And it's not a particularly uncommon concern for young primaries at the college level. We see so many players, but oftentimes the ones who do turn into defensive impact guys at the league have tools. They have projectable ways to impact the game, where Acuff to me is a dynamic offensive player, but I just don't see him ever reaching even. I'd be pretty surprised if he was even neutral on defense in the league. And those are the kind of small guards that I'm probably going to fade, at least from the perspective of a lottery pick.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, it's tough to build out a two-way impact, a role in the NBA without two-way impact, and if you're a small guard without the defense, I mean that's a lot to make up for. You have to be a special, offensive player. And,
he reminds me of
he has skills.
Sexton, Quickly, Pritchard type player, not necessarily mirroring the ways that those guys impact the game. And Acuff's different than all of those in his own ways. Genuinely very good offensive players who are just not good enough to be centerpieces and have very massive limitations in other ways that lead them to be secondaries or bench initiators. I think it's worth saying that Acuff is better than most of these guys were at the same age. So I think that's definitely a potential upside case for him. But yeah, I think Acuff to me is just a very double down the fairway kind of pick. It's if you're taking him in the lottery in the mid first round, to me, I'm I get it. He's going to be a good offensive player. He's going to contribute. He's going to produce. And I understand that, if you're we can't strike out on this pick, I'm cool taking Acuff, even though I think even for the sturdiest small guards, being a small guard always lowers your floor, just like as we've talked about.
Yeah, no, that's all fair, and like he is a knockdown 3-point shooter. I think that is probably his standout trait. Like, just against Vanderbilt the other night, he was running off screens and splashing threes, relocating, like clear,
his shooting rocks. It's
just
awesome.
Clear level, like knockdown shooter, and like he found such a rhythm. He started like working in some midi pull-ups off of those screens and handoffs. So it was nice to see a little bit more well-rounded off the dribble game in that one for him. Because like you said, it feels a little bit limited of a skill set. Like the defense comes and goes, but the passing is there as a point guard, and he can be a shooter. I saw him a while ago live at IMG versus in the Mount Verde tournament, and his athleticism popped out, his transition game and his 3-point shooting popped out at that level, like two years ago. But he will pop off and has popped off at every level as a shooter and a scorer, and I think that does matter and should be accounted for when you're betting on like you said, like an easy bet offensively might be more hit or miss defensively. Right. You might have to cover some things up.
And
but
this is another
we're
one
getting to that point in the draft where you're betting on something.
Where it's like, I think we talked about with Yaxel, like some teams are going to be into him in the top 5, some teams probably won't. Where it's like, it's not even just about roster construction. It's just like philosophy and like what kind of players you like to go for. And like there's some teams I think that'll value Acuff top 10 lottery. I mean, he's top 10 consensus. I pretty strongly disagree with that. But like he's, clearly valued like that in the NBA. But I think there's certain constructions and teams like are going to be anti-short guards that high. Like there's some teams that just aren't really interested in taking those players. So
yeah, no, that's totally fair. With the next pick, this is kind of wide open to me. I have another like 20 names that I like, but you could really talk me into different guys going forward. But I want to shout out Acaden Lewis at this point in the draft. I don't think he's on your board at the moment.
I have not had a chance to watch him this year.
Okay,
but I liked Acaden in high school. So
yeah, and pretty much same here. I have caught him a little bit this year as well, but like I'm definitely basing this projection based a little more on what I saw in high school. Another like natural two-way field point guard, like a very, very natural point guard skills, like has a little bit of a lefty pull-up 3-point game, pull-up jumper game to him. I gave him a little Brandon Jennings comp, and he brought that up as one of the players that he has watched before when I interviewed him and stuff. So that was kind of cool to hear. But just a walking bucket guy that can hit the pull-up 3, naturally run your offense and bring a little defense, like a two-way guard that can hit the 3 and bring like smart two-way fields to the game. Good bet to make for me. So that's going to be the 10th pick in rounding out our 2026 guard draft for the NBA draft. But there's so many names left. I'm down to keep going. How about a little bit of a speed round to go through maybe our top 20, where tell me like your favorite thing, like what separates the guy, like if the guy has an outlier skill or outlier concern or something.
Elevator pitch.
Yeah, something like that. I like it. So we'll go 11 through 20 that way with just a ton of names. Who do you got with the 11th
like you
pick
said, a million ways you could go, but I'll take Christian Anderson, who is another one I'm lower on than consensus, but still like. I think very similar to Acuff and Meleek, like we talked about, like the lack of ability to create easy shots downhill, to handle pressure on the ball and defensively as well. Like Anderson, I think is like technically pretty sound. He's quick laterally. I think he's even pretty strong in his core for his size, but like he is really small, thin frame, like not a long wingspan. You can clearly see the ways that he's going to be limited on defense. Like exceptional shooter, strong case as I think the best off-dribble shooting guard in the class. Just shooting guard in the class in general. I think you can make a real argument for that. And his pick and roll playmaking and passing in general are awesome. So and again, I think without the kind of size that a guy like Bennett Stirtz has, it's harder to turn that into like a star package. But I think Anderson's great, and I think he'll be a good NBA player off the back of his shooting and his playmaking, and the fact that like he'll be fine enough on defense in the regular season, I think.
Yeah, and this is Germany. Christian Anderson, he's teammates with Franz and the Wagner Bros, the De Silva Bros over there. He always stands out as like a downhill force type of guy, like just getting to the rim anytime I catch him, and can definitely see how his scoring and shooting are also elements to his game. So that a guy that can drive and shoot will have value in this league. So that's a good range. I definitely have him in this range as well, just a little lower on my overall board. But that's number 11, Christian Anderson. I really like his teammate Jalen Petty as well. Mentioned him earlier. I'm not taking him yet, but he's on my radar, also in this range. Here's another name for you: is Sean Abave guard or wing?
I think he's a wing and a non-prospect personally, but
wow. Well, he's around this range for me, but we'll count him as a wing for that. For that comment right there. Not even a prospect. My guy Sean.
He has not played. He hasn't played 20 minutes against a high major team since early December, and he's healthy.
Right, well, that's a fair point. We got to see him play at this level. He was walking bucket at the last level. Like he went head to head with like Devonta in a game I caught him. Just not like head to head matchup and outdueled him actually. Like it was crazy. So one other name who I'm not there yet, but Otega Owe, is he also on our small forward list?
No, I'd have him as a guard. I think it's fair.
Yeah, I have him as like a KCP type 2 guard in my head, just a really strong
I think
defender.
He's a pure 2/off guard.
Yeah. Okay, so some good looks. But with a Bave off, I'm actually gonna reach here a little bit for Braden Burries as just on the talent. I'm gonna bet on just the overall talent of him as a scorer, a shooter, an offensive engine type. Zach Welch was really high on him when I talked to him last time about the top 100 camp, actually, as a guy that stood out there. But just a guy that you can kind of potentially rely on to run a little offense for you. And at this point in the draft, I'm looking for smart guards that can shoot the ball and store the ball and connect the ball, dribble, pass, and shoot, and ideally bring that two-way defensive impact as well. So this is one of those guys that stands out to me. I'm not sure if you have any thoughts on Burries.
Oh, definitely lower than consensus. I mean, we took him. I think he's going like consensus was a first round guy. He's definitely talented, but I think he's the other one who's like been very, very poor defensively. He has size and like tools to project there, but I think his defense has been incredibly poor. And then just struggles. Another one who I think struggles to get downhill by himself, but just like a big, solid, like he can shoot, he can dribble a little bit. His passing's all right. When he gets to the rim, he can finish there. He's fine. I'd like to see him go back to school personally, but
okay, there it is. There you go. So with the 13th pick,
I'll take Tamin Lipsey.
I need to see more of him. Tell me about him.
He's been awesome for Iowa State. I mean, I've been a fan of his for quite some time, but I think he's taken a bit of an offensive leap this year where his ability to like throw high level one-handed pick and roll passes while also avoiding turnovers has been really impressive. And that's to go along with the stuff that he's always done, which is incredible defense. His hands are exceptional. I mean, 4.5% career steal rate, playing 4 years of college basketball as a starter all 4 years. Like that is crazy. And I'm usually not into these older guards who are late breakouts, but Tamin was awesome as a freshman. He just wasn't necessarily like NBA good, but he was a good college player as a freshman. So I think he's just a really rock solid bet to be like a role player guard in the NBA.
There it is. There's the pitch with the 14th pick. I'm going with my guy. I'm not going to go too low on him. I'm not out on my guy yet. Tahad Pettiford, welcome to the 14th pick in the guards draft. He's just too much fun. He's shown the explosiveness, the downhill burst, he can get to the rack. He can shoot from 3 with the pull-up and tough shots and two-way feel for the game. I would have taken him a lot higher probably last year off the projection of what he did than, what he's kind of doing now. But I do think there's some small sample aspect to everything. And, there can be some games, different roles, different games. But you do want to see him. The idea was more usage this year. We should see more star output, and it hasn't quite translated, but it's still a little bit early for everything. I think I've seen enough good to buy a lot of the good that he has shown as a prospect, and just for reference, this year he's on DSI, 76 DSI defense for Cerebro, but that's probably his highest stat. 70 on defense or as a 3-point shooter. Not really jumping off the page on any of these stats, but he's just an explosive guy that stands out to me. Are there anything that worries you about his play this year?
Yeah, I mean, I just frankly don't particularly think he's much of an NBA player. I just don't see a path for like very small combos to be NBA guys, honestly. And like Pettyford, if he was a better, like, he's a good shooter, but he's not like elite or anything. He's like an okay passer to me, but he's not like exceptional by any means. He just, to me, like, it's DOA to be a guard that size who can't score and has the kind of defensive limitations. But I do think he's I certainly agree he's a player who I think is, I certainly enjoy him much more than I think of him as a prospect, I guess.
There you go. Yeah, maybe that's part of it too. He is exciting to watch, so can be fun to watch. Maybe that draws it in, and that could be a little something to look out for myself too, to not buy into the excitement too much and stick to the winning plays. But I think he does a little bit of both. So a guy to keep an eye on. That brings us to pick 15 in the guard draft for you.
At this point, I'm just going to take guys I want to talk about. I'll take Braden Smith.
Oh, nice. I like it. Great pick.
Just a silly offensive player. I mean, I'm very confident in his ability to stick in the league as like a rotation guy. I mean, 6 feet tall, generously, does not defend, does not get to the rim, is not going to be a star almost certainly at the NBA level, but like has a real case as the best pick and roll player in the entire draft, and his shooting is phenomenal. But yeah, I'll take Braden Smith. Like I said, I think he's just pretty easily going to be an impactful player at the NBA level.
Yeah, that's a great shot. One of my favorite players in this draft as well. Just pick and roll maestro, can run high volume pick and rolls, get a good look every time. We not to be too obvious with the comps, but we did mention TJ McConnell earlier, and then just a guy that can make us maybe find a similar role as a rotation guard that can initiate offense, run some pick and roll, and get to his spots and get to his shots. Braden Smith, one of the highest two-way field guys in the draft, even with his size, just knows how to jump passes for steals, where to be, time them up, push the pace off of them, and running and gunning with that Purdue team. I think he's the Big Ten all-time assist leader by now. He's been around forever, but he's just an incredible point guard. Good shout here. I have him lower in like maybe the 40s at the moment, but could easily move him up a little bit.
On my board. Like, I have him in like the 50s, but I'm well beyond the point of the specific numbers really mattering at this point.
Yeah, I'm glad you gave him a shout though. Like, I'm glad we talked about him here. So with the next pick of mine, we're probably gonna go with guys. You might not have some of mine. I might not have yours that high, and that's where we're at in the draft. I think I have Jalen Petty this high. I was thinking about it earlier, and like if his same as before, just brings that another small guard, but we're talking guards here. Just a tough guy that makes winning plays, can hit the open 3-point shot, and run your offense, initiate the offense as a natural point guard. Caught him at Texas Tech the other day as well. He was going back and forth against Flemings in that highlight performance. He had like 4 threes, and Texas Tech Petty's team won that game. Petty's team also won the top 100 camp with T. Ross as his coach. Fun fact at that camp. So it's just a fun player. So shout out Jalen Petty at this point. He was a freshman and just kind of earning minutes, so he might not even enter the draft. But that's probably around where I have him, just because of his complete game as a point guard. That if you can play defense, dribble, pass, and shoot, make good decisions, quick processing, like a little bit of explosiveness too as an athlete, like you've got a lot of good traits, I think, for this type of exercise. So who do you have with the 17th pick?
I'll just keep farming the good college guards and take Bruce Thornton.
All right.
He's been awesome this year, and Unlike Braden Smith, very easy to project him as a defensive plus. I mean, he's a very clear defensive plus at the college level. Like his point of attack defense, his quick feet, his low center of gravity, his strength. Like he's going to be a disgusting guard defender at the next level. But like exceptional 3-point shooter, very smart player. Another one of these guys like makes positive decisions, isn't putting the ball in harm's way necessarily, and has the kind of dynamic off dribble shooting. Like similar to Smith, like never gets to the rim, is not gonna. He draws more fouls than your average guy of this archetype because of his strength and his physicality. And I think that translates. I like him more as a prospect than Smith. I like watching Smith more. But Thornton, I think, is another one who I expect to have a pretty good shot to be a good rotation point guard in the league.
There you go, another good shout here, and just an absolutely loaded class. One last guy, or no, wait, I have two more guys kind of in this, I guess, first round tier, late first round, early second round tier for me. I'm going Rob Wright, who's transferred to BYU with Devonta here. Just another played at Mount Verde, another smart point guard, knows where to be. Another small smart point guard, two-way field, but in this realm of like just knows where to be, knows how to play, hits the open three, keeps the ball moving. A little undersized, but can hold his own as a smart defender, but might get picked on a little bit. But still going with Rob here because he's just a guy that I think is gonna kind of bring winning habits to some team at the next level as like a 3-point spacing connector guard who just kind of knows how to make smart plays on the basketball court. So that two more picks here in the guards draft. Second to last pick. Who do you got?
So many options.
I'm going to throw a name at you just because I want to know if you have any thoughts on him, and neither of us has mentioned him. Braylon Mullins. Is he a guard?
I think
is he a wing?
Wing to me would have gone off the board ages ago.
That's what okay. Sounds good. So yeah, that's someone I need. I can admit I'm a little late on like basically three guys in this whole process. Tanner, Wagler, and Mullins are guys that I need to just simply see more of to fully appreciate. We don't have a ton of time here. Maybe we'll hit on him later, but does he have a special skill that stands out to you, Mullins?
Yeah, I mean his blend of like shooting versatility and processing speed are ridiculous. He's
all right.
He's such a good bet to be like a movement shooter with more skills than your garden variety movement shooter.
There you go. And I see you have him like in that late lottery mid first level tier with which very nicely put on the horizontal board to very easily find. Very nicely formatted there. So, who else would you have 19 overall?
I suppose for our last pick, I'm also just probably going to keep abandoning my actual board and take guys who I like to talk about. I'll show Boogie Flan some love. Why not?
All right, there we go. I like it.
Actually, I'm going to change my mind and take another older guard who I was watching today and that's Jacoby Gillespie. On Tennessee.
Right. Yeah. I'm glad you shouted him out.
He's just having a rock solid year. He was good last year at Maryland. He's like 6'1" 2 guard is not like a super enticing archetype, but especially if we're talking like mid-late second round picks. I mean, awesome shooter, can really pass, can really dribble. Big fan of his defense as well. Like really sturdy, quick point of attack defender. I think his ability to mirror guards and kind of rip around screens with his strength and footwork is pretty unique among players in this archetype. And he's just, to me, like such a problematic driver and finisher that I have a hard time projecting him being anything more than like a role player. But he's a great off-ball shooter. He can pass a little bit out of like secondary empty pick and rolls. It's just a good player. Another one of these like older experienced college guys who I think has a decent shot to stick in the league.
Absolutely. Good. Gillespie's a great shout at this stage. One more guy. Oh, Mr. Irrelevant, I guess, for the top 20. Shout out to Ortega because I was going to take him, but I also now realize I have left someone out, and that is Caden Boozer. I gotta give Caden a shout here at this last point in the process. Just another natural, somewhere between a connector and a natural point guard, I guess, but he always seems to be setting up his teammates for success. Obviously, he gets to play with his brother, Cameron Boozer, So they have a natural brother pairing, and who knows exactly how they inflate each other's numbers at all. But I think it's just a natural pick and roll pairing where they make each other better, and they kind of show off that skill set together. Caden can be, in my mind, kind of a plus defender, a 3-point shooter, connector type guard that can guard ones and twos, and smart enough guy that he can run your offense, even if he's not the most natural point guard in the world compared to some of these other guys. I do kind of think he can make smart connector passes with that two-way feel. So shout out Boozer here.
I considered
the 20th pick.
I considered Caden for a couple of my last picks, so I'm with you.
All right.
He's one that I'm also. I mean, he's just scoring is far away. We'll need another year or two in college, but he has a chance to me to be a really high level point guard defender at the next level.
Yeah. The scoring isn't quite what you would want. I'm not gonna. With the comparisons in my head, I'm thinking of somewhere like an Andre Miller or Alonzo or a Jay Kidd range of scoring isn't the first thing that comes to mind with these guys. Defense, downhill, 3-point shooting, natural point guard, but I say natural point guard, but I guess not quite as much as some of the other guys. But he just clearly can run some pick and roll and make connector smart passes.
I mean, he's a natural point guard, and to me, the way I think a layman thinks of what a pure point guard is, or a 90 pure point guard, where can't really score, but can't really drive. But
that sense, yes,
and can pass
exactly. Exactly. Maybe traditional point guard is more of the word than natural, because nowadays you need more of that scoring talent. But his impact, I think, will come from defense, threes, and connector playmaking, making the right play on both ends with some initiation, more so than go get us a bucket every time down the floor. That's not really his game. I think it's more of smart processing with him. So shout out to Caden here. I mean, that's 20 guys who I literally think all have a shot at being drafted in the first round and have, a case for it. And there's probably another handful of names, that we didn't even get to. Dash Daniels, Cameron Carr, Andrei Stojakovic, Tunde Yesufu. Some of these guys might be on the wing as well. Caden Mingo, Isaiah Evans, Boogie Flan, you said, Avdilas, Emmanuel Sharp, Kyan Anthony. Shout out to him. He's having a fun couple of games here. We'll see if he can work his way higher into this process. Any names that we didn't get to? You want to give a shout for some of these guards?
Just the other guys I have in my top 60 that we haven't mentioned. Sergio De La Rey plays at Valencia. Good player. Doesn't play as much because it's tough for teenage 20-year-old guards in Euro League.
Emmanuel Sharp and
I like a lot.
Anthony Robinson.
He's been disappointing this year, unfortunately, which hurts me as a Mizzou fan. But
that'll do it. And Emmanuel Sharp with Houston. I mean, Houston has 4 guys in this draft. It's crazy. They're loaded. So yeah. Any other names here that we didn't get to?
No, you covered it.
That'll do it, man. I mean, we did 20 names in the draft. We covered some extras. There's guys that could be wings that we're gonna count and give a shout to. But man, this draft is just absolutely loaded. As one of your tweets said, I hope your team is looking for a point guard, because this draft has plenty of them to pick from. So you can definitely find some. And I think to that point, the second round picks have real value if you can actually get a guy to stay in the draft to stay a second round pick. You can get a real rotation player level talent, especially as a guard this year. But really, it doesn't really even favor the player to do that. They should try to just stay unrestricted and pick their own destination on the player side. But some guys just need to get drafted and take that chance and opportunity. And if you can get, one of these guards in the second round, you're getting real value, I think is what stands out. Along with, later in the lottery, there's just a lot of options where, if you really love it, this is definitely one of those drafts where if you love a guard, you can go get him. You can trade up for him. You can secure him based on where he's slotted to go. There's just so many options that I think there isn't really very, other than Darryn Peterson and Flemings, most people would probably be willing to trade you their slot so you can get your guy and they can move down and find someone just as talented roughly in a similar tier. And that's kind of where the value is in some of the trades, I think, because of this class. But man, thank you for taking all this time, man. We've been, this has been great. Some great draft analysis here with Ben Pfeifer. Knows his stuff as well as anyone. Appreciate you taking the time, talking some scouting, man. It's been really interesting, and we'll be sure to get this up.
Thank you for having me on, as always.
Absolutely. We got to check in on the Sportscasting team bet draft rankings. You know, it might have evened out since we first did it before the season. I got to check in and do the math here. I'll get an update here for everybody soon, and run that back. But yeah, we got to get, you know, maybe a Swish Theory draft pod of some sort going before the actual draft. But it was cool to, you know, hit on the big board today of where we're at. And, you know, we'll involve the whole team going forward for sure. Make it real fun. But I appreciate you taking the time today, Ben. It's been a lot of fun. Make sure to follow Ben at BJPF_ on Twitter, and his work at Sportscasting NBA and at Swish Theory, and his Twitter and YouTube channel where, you know, he's breaking down prospects left and right. Hope you have a good one, Ben.
Cool. Thanks, man. I gotta head out, but appreciate you.
Yes, sir.